Elden Ring Shadow of the Erd Tree is right around the corner, and this thing is going to be absolutely massive. It is already massive, but when this drops, it's going to bring in a ton of new players to the Soulsborne genre. That's why today I have a survival guide for those of you guys who are new to the Soulsborne genre in 2024. FromSoftware is one of the most creative game studios of all time, and they are known for, just dropping absolute masterpieces. But their games are notoriously brutally difficult, and they can be a lot to digest, especially for new players who have no idea how these games work, okay? I was in your guys' shoes once. So sit back, relax, and if you guys do enjoy the content, make sure to drop a like and a subscribe for content like this all the time. And yeah, let's go ahead and get into it. Before we get into tips and tricks, I'm going to give you guys a roadmap in the order of which you guys should play the FromSoftware Soulsborne games, okay? So we're going to go ahead and start with that. The first game you guys should play is Dark Souls 3. Now, some of you guys are probably super confused as to why I'm picking Dark Souls 3 as the beginner's Souls game. Let me explain why. Dark Souls 3 is the best game for beginners because it is going to teach you the fundamentals of Souls games in general. Like, you're going to learn how to dodge roll, you're going to learn how to manage your stamina, you're going to learn how to parry, and it does it on an easier playing field. Dark Souls 3 is the easiest game in the Dark Souls trilogy. It is still pretty challenging. It's a Souls game, but it is pretty easy compared to like Dark Souls 2, and it's going to teach you the basics, and you guys really need to hone the basics if you want to get through all of these games. It's also extremely new player friendly compared to all the other Souls games. Elden Ring is super new player friendly as well, but I would argue that the open world exploration in Elden Ring is a little bit too intimidating at first to someone who's just brand new to the Souls genre. So I think Dark Souls 3 is a great place to start because, you get that linear path that most of the Souls games offer, not like a big open world like Elden Ring, and you're able to, really understand what a Souls game is like. On top of that, it's a phenomenal game. Like I said before, I do think it is a little bit more vanilla compared to the other FromSoftware games. Like, it's a little bit more basic, but it's a great game, dude. And it's an amazing game to start off at. It's where I started, and it honestly really helped me get into these games. And, Dark Souls 3 is one of my personal favorites. And if you guys are worried about, starting with the third game in the trilogy, don't worry about it because the stories in these games are pretty hard to digest most of the time. So yeah, I think Dark Souls 3 is a good place to start for new players, and it's probably the best place to start. Moving on, the next game you should play is Elden Ring. Elden Ring is a pretty easy Souls game just because there's so many tools available to you. You can use summons, you can use OP builds, all of that. But if you're going to play Elden Ring like a normal Dark Souls game and you're not going to summon, you're just going to use like a sword and shield or just a sword, Elden Ring can be pretty challenging. But, after playing Dark Souls 3, you should have a pretty baseline understanding of how builds and everything work. So you can go into Elden Ring and you can kind of play it however you want. You can basically make Elden Ring as hard as you want. I recommend making it easy, make an OP build. That's like the most fun part of Elden Ring, in my opinion, is just making a super OP build. But I think Elden Ring is a great second game for you to play in the series. I think the transition from Dark Souls 3 to Elden Ring is really smooth as well because both these games honestly feel really similar. Like, I've recently played Dark Souls 3 after playing Elden Ring, and Dark Souls 3 feels extremely modern, and it feels a lot like Elden Ring with like the visuals and the controls. So I think that will be a nice way for new Elden Ring players to get some training wheels and go into Elden Ring, and then even Shadow of the Erd Tree, which is coming out this summer. The next game you guys are going to play is going to be Dark Souls 1. Now that you have a good base foundation for, Souls game mechanics, you have Elden Ring and Dark Souls 3 under your belt, you can move on to Dark Souls 1. Dark Souls 1 is an absolute masterpiece of a game as well. It's so good. I will warn you though, it is a little bit dated. It's dated at this point, and because it's a little bit dated, it is extremely monogamous at first. Just to kind of get through it and figure out what you need to do. I spent the first 9 hours, my first Dark Souls 1 playthrough, trying to get out of like the starting areas. So definitely watch a tutorial for Dark Souls 1. But, now that you have a baseline understanding of, Souls games, and you started off with Dark Souls 3 and Elden Ring, Dark Souls 1 will be a lot easier. That's why I tell people to, follow this roadmap that, I have as a Souls veteran, because Dark Souls 3, it's just a lot more, easy to digest than Dark Souls 1. And if you start off, with any other game series, you would basically just play like the first game of the trilogy, right? But Dark Souls 1 it's a lot different in its map design and level design, and it is really confusing with its mechanics. So go play Dark Souls 1, it's good, and you can nail the mechanics pretty easily, and it's not like something that's impossible to understand. I just think that having Elden Ring and Dark Souls 3 under your belt before you play this is going to be really, really good for you. Two things to know beforehand. One, stay out of the Tomb of Giants early game, okay? Stay out of the Tomb of Giants. That's all I'm going to say. I had to restart an entire playthrough. Most punishing Souls moment of all time. Stay out of the Tomb of Giants early game, okay? I can't stress that enough. And also, second, you are in it for a treat with Dark Souls 1, okay? Dark Souls 1 it's amazing, dude. It's so good. This game has an atmosphere like no other, and it's just beautiful through and through. I mean, all of these games are, but Dark Souls 1 holds a place in my heart. So just because Dark Souls 1 is super old, don't skip on it, bro. This game is a true treat. Now, the next two games I'm going to bring up are optional, okay? So the first game that you could play after Dark Souls 1 is Dark Souls 2. Now listen, Dark Souls 2 is a really good game, okay? I like Dark Souls 2. It's not a bad video game, but I do think it's on the weaker end of FromSoftware's catalog, in my opinion. And the reason I don't really like Dark Souls 2 that much is because it's rigged against the player, and it's kind of supposed to be like FromSoftware just wanted to make a super brutal, difficult game, and Dark Souls 2 just feels rigged and unfair. I mean, when you're playing a lot of these games, you're gonna have cheese moments, but that's seriously all Dark Souls 2 is. It's just cheese. Like, it's a lot of stuff that's out of your control most of the time, and it's really not a fun experience, you know? Like, Souls games are fun because they're hard, but it's like a certain type of hard. Like, you know, the journey to become better and, overcome a boss, and, you get super good, and it's all skill, it's all in your control. Like, that is what type of hard I'm looking for. But if it's something that's just like cheese and out of your control, it takes away from the experience. The reason Souls games are so fun is really the learning experience and the journey of becoming good at these games. And Dark Souls 2 doesn't really allow you to do that much just because of how unfair the game is. So you can absolutely play this after Dark Souls 1. You'll be well equipped for it. But it's just really not a great experience, man. I'm not gonna lie. A lot of the bosses are lackluster. The gameplay is clunky. I mean, Dark Souls 1 gameplay is clunky, but Dark Souls 1 is like a masterpiece game. I don't think Dark Souls 2 is worth it if you're not that interested in playing like every single game in their catalog. So you guys can skip on Dark Souls 2. Let's go ahead and get into the next game you guys can skip over if you want. The next game that is optional in my opinion is Demon Souls. Now look, Demon Souls isn't a bad game either. It was the first game that FromSoftware made, and you can actually play a PS5 remake. It's pretty good and it looks really good. The problem with Demon Souls though is it's just lackluster in content, and it's not really worth playing. It's kind of like a small game. Not really that memorable with in terms of bosses, builds. I think you can skip over it for sure. If you're not that interested in it, you can skip over it. It has a lot of wonky mechanics as well, and most of the boss fights here are gimmick fights. So it's just meh overall. It's not a bad experience, and it's really fun. I mean, I enjoy Demon Souls. Like, I love FromSoftware. But if you guys are getting into these games, you can definitely hold off on Demon Souls until you're waiting to play something new. That's what I would save Dark Souls 2 and Demon Souls for, is after you've played like all of their masterpiece games, then you go and play those games while you're waiting for them to drop something new. If you guys are really fiending for a FromSoftware Souls game, so just wait on Demon Souls. In my opinion, if you really want to play it, go ahead. It's not a horrible game by any means. It's just meh. But yeah, those two are optional. So after you play Dark Souls 1, you can go play those two. Or you guys can go and play Bloodborne. Bloodborne is really where the formula starts to switch up heavily. Bloodborne is absolutely amazing, and in my opinion, this game has the best lore out of all the FromSoftware games. They all have incredible lore, but dude, this game's lore is crazy. This game, plays a lot differently than the Dark Souls games. It has a ton of the fundamentals, you're going to be dodging, all that sort of thing, but the parry system is the biggest thing here. Basically, you have a pistol or some sort of firearm you can parry with. It's really, really good. It's probably the best parry system out of all like the vanilla fundamental FromSoftware games outside of like Sekiro. Sekiro is its own thing. We're going to get into that. Bloodborne, it's so good, but it is really different from Dark Souls and Elden Ring. But there are things that you are going to take from those games into Bloodborne. And Bloodborne is really hard, it's really challenging, and it is a bit old. You can't really play a like 60 FPS version of it, unfortunately. It's capped at 30 FPS right now, just because like the PlayStation 4 edition or whatever. That's at the time of this recording. There is rumors of a remaster for this game. That's something we're going to talk about in another video. But anyways, go play Bloodborne. There's not much to say. I think Bloodborne you should go into blind 100% after playing all of these games. This game is amazing to play with no walkthroughs for your first time. So yeah. And finally, the last game you guys should play is Sekiro Shadows Die Twice. Sekiro Shadows Die Twice is so good, but I would say it's probably the most challenging out of all the games just because it plays so differently. Sekiro was the last game that I played, and it was for a good reason because the mechanics here are really different from the Souls-like formula that FromSoftware introduced. Now, there are a ton of things here that are similar, like the dodging, but the parrying and the stance meter here is really the biggest change in mechanics. Not to mention the fact too, you don't create your own character in this game, you play as one protagonist. There's all sorts of craziness going on. The movement in this game is really good, and it actually has a platforming element to it, which is really strong as well. It's so good. You have like a prosthetic arm, you have a grappling hook. There's a lot of craziness going on here, but this game is definitely worth playing last. And this is a rhythm game. It's a Souls game, sure, but it's a rhythm game at the end of the day. The parry system, it's not like the other Souls games where you get one parry off and you're able to visceral. You have to parry consecutively over and over, and this, forces you to pretty much learn bosses legit. There's no way to cheese them. You have to get the rhythm and the timing down, and you have to, just basically understand the rhythm of the fight. And this game, it's so good, man, and it's one of the best learning experiences with a video game I've ever had. It's just so fun to jump into this game blind and be absolutely garbage and then slowly progress to the point of mastery. Once you beat Sekiro, you're going to want to play it over and over because you've gotten so good at it, and it is really worth it, man. I've played this game 12 times. I've platinumed it. It's so good, dude. All right, so moving on. Now that we got the roadmap out of the way, let's go ahead and cover some general tips and tricks. We're going to go ahead and start off with character creation. So in every single FromSoftware game that is a Soulsborne game, you are going to be making a character and a class from the very start of the game, except Sekiro. And if you're somebody that's intimidated by this and you don't want to make the wrong choice and you're afraid that you're going to be locked into your certain class, this is the most important thing to know. Your class does not matter whatsoever. You can change your build at any time. If you guys started as a mage or like a pyromancer, you can easily switch to like a warrior. This is because the leveling systems in these types of games are super easy to understand. Basically, you kill stuff, you get souls, and use those souls to level up. You can basically just put as many skill points into whatever you want. So your build really doesn't matter at the start. Now, your starting class can help you be efficient in the early game. It is really only going to make a difference in the early game. But just know that if you're on your first playthrough on whatever Souls game you're playing, you're definitely going to be changing your build. Maybe you get stuck on a certain boss that's super hard and you think that your build is trash, whatever. So, look up some guides and whatever, and, just help find some guidance. But if you feel like you started off with the wrong build or anything, don't worry, because you can always fix it and it's really not that hard. Granted, you might have to do some farming, especially if you're later on in the game and you realize that you kind of made your build wonky, but hey, it is what it is. You can always fix it. But yeah, anyways, if you guys want to go in blind and just kind of create your build yourself and do it yourself, you're welcome to. If it's your first playthrough on any, type of Souls game though, I really recommend doing some research on pre-builds because they can kind of help you out and they'll help you get the most out of the game, because these games can be really fun when you have like a super strong build that is super efficient, and it'll just give you a better overall experience in my opinion. And I really wish I did that for my first playthrough with a bunch of the Soulsborne games. Now let's go ahead and move on to the next segment, and this is going to be the hub. Okay, so the hub is super important to understand. In every single Souls-like game and Soulsborne game, there is a hub. Okay, the hub is going to contain NPCs that help you level up your weapons and help you level up your stats. If you can't do it at a bonfire in some of these games, you're going to do it at the hub. It's essentially just home base for you guys in these types of games. Okay, now in the hub, there's going to be some NPCs that are basically all the same across literally every single Souls-like game you play. Like I said before, you'll have someone that can level up your stats. Usually you'll have, some sort of blacksmith where you can upgrade your weapons and armor and repair things. And you'll usually have another NPC that'll upgrade your healing items like a healing flask or whatever. Some Souls-like games and some Soulsborne games will let you level up from the, checkpoints, the bonfires, or the site of graces. So you can mess around with that. But just know, if you can't find anything in the list for the bonfires and the checkpoints, it's most likely in the hub. And There's also going to be a ton of miscellaneous NPCs across all the games. So it is always super, super, super good to, whenever you're starting a new playthrough, go and talk to every single NPC you see in the hub, okay? And this is just for typical RPG reasons. Most of these NPCs have side quests, and you can just kind of figure out the purpose of each NPC so that when you come across certain items in the game, you have a better understanding of what you need to do with it, because a lot of the items in these games can be super confusing. And that's going to feed into my next point. If you guys find an item on the ground that you have no clue what its purpose is, dude, please Google it, okay? Just trust me, Google it, do some research, and figure out what it is, because the item descriptions most of the time aren't going to help you. They're going to be super vague, and you don't really want to dismantle or just get rid of anything that is super important. Like, you could have something that's super valuable, even if it seems worthless. Like, Souls games are weird with quest items, so if you find something and you don't know what it is, just Google it, bro. You're gonna save yourself a lot of heartache most of the time, okay? Moving on, let's go ahead and talk about the importance of being agile and being able to move fast and managing your encumbrance, okay? Guys, please do not slap a bunch of heavy armor on your character. Okay, dude, that is going to make your experience extremely, extremely hard at first. You want your character to be as fast and as agile as possible. Rolling and dodging is the best way to play defense in these games. I literally do not care, man. You can learn how to parry all you want, but dodging and, learning how to be fast around boss fights is going to be super, super helpful for you when you're trying to get to a boss's weak spot, and it's just going to make the game a lot better. So master dodging and make sure you are not putting on too much armor and you are able to move around fast. Adding on to that, as a little side note, you guys do not have to fight every single enemy you see in these games. If you guys just see a bunch of normal enemies in an area, you can run right past them. You don't have to fight all of them. That is a super, super big game changer for a lot of new players. A lot of new players will assume that they have to kill everything in front of them. No. If you guys see a bunch of ads, just run right by them so you can unlock the next area. Some ads can be super aggressive, so you can get rid of the annoying ones. Don't really try to fight everything though, unless you're trying to farm up souls, or clear annoying ads that just won't let you get past a certain area. But for the most part, just try to run past every single ad, man. It's going to make it a lot easier for you. And that's why it's super important to keep your character as light as possible so you can move around fast, okay? But yeah, that is going to pretty much wrap up the tips and tricks. And I just want to leave this with you guys, okay? If you guys are new to Souls games, please don't be discouraged, okay? These games are super, super hard, but they're not impossible, and at the end of the day, they're just video games. Like, you can pretty easily get through these, okay? I know a lot of people talk about how hard Souls games are, but trust me, bro, don't get intimidated. It's just a video game, bro. It's not that hard, I promise you. Also, these are some of the best video games ever made, hands down. I don't care. FromSoftware has an amazing catalog, and a lot of these Souls games are totally, totally worth playing, bro. Like, they just hit different. It's a completely different experience you're not going to get anywhere else. Drop a like on the video if you guys made it this far, and good luck to everybody. Shadow of the Erd Tree comes out in about a month at the time of this recording. I'm super, super excited, bro. I'm going to be playing that a ton, as I'm sure most of you guys are. So yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.